So, the working title of this research project is Redefining Queer Perspectives of LGBTQ Emerging Adults on Representation and Identity Politics within LGBTQ Arts Festivals in Ireland. So, it is based on the idea that LGBTQ arts festivals predominantly resonate with an older audience. This has been explored by Binney and Kless with regard to the Gays LGBT Film Festival in Dublin. Remarks are made from festival organisers that their audience is predominantly over 45 and young LGBT people do not go to LGBT arts events. In an interview with Roisin Garrity, programmer for Gays, she reiterated this point regarding the age range of their attendees. In 2018, 11% of their audience fell into the 18 to 24 age bracket. She remarked that the program of the festival is catered in part to their already established older audience. Other LGBTQ arts festival directors also expressed difficulties in engaging younger audiences. When questioning these people as to why this is, numerous reasons were given. The reason of more interested in LGBTQ culture online was particularly interesting to me. With this in mind, I wanted to explore this demographic further and see if their attitudes towards community representation online impacted on their attitudes towards representation within these identity-based festivals. So the term emerging adults will be used to describe this age group. Arnott describes this demographic as an explorative life period distinct from adolescence and established adulthood. It's usually between 18 to 25 years old. So further research has remarked that this life period is more significant to current generations as opposed to previous ones. It can be characterized in many ways, including instability and identity exploration. Indeed, LGBTQ emerging adults can also be seen in the same way, culturally and socially distinct from LGBTQ adults. Identity exploration can also be seen as part of this life period, resulting in different attitudes towards identity categories and terminology. Terms like non-binary, fluid, and queer are much more popular in younger LGBTQ demographics. This is highlighted in a YouGov survey where, when asked to define their sexuality, 43% of 18 to 24-year-olds placed themselves in the non-binary area as neither 100% gay or straight. The survey also highlighted that non-binary responses progressively decreased as those surveyed got older, remarking that with each generation, people see their sexuality and identity as less fixed. So this led me on to an exploration of how this demographic felt about representation of the LGBTQ community in the media. So, media representation has rapidly increased in the last number of decades. It is crucial as it is the primary site for knowledge regarding LGBTQ identities. It is particularly relevant for younger people. Many LGBTQ media characters are the first exposure to the community and they act as important guides. However, numerous factors impact on this representation. In a study by McEnroy and Craig, many young LGBTQ people found that traditional media offered limited representations due in part to being controlled by middle-class middle-aged men, financially motivated, and appealing to a mainstream audience. In contrast, online representations were much more varied as they were predominantly controlled by younger people. They were less motivated by financial reasons and they offered more opportunities for interaction and discussion. My research will build on this by seeing if different programming styles associated with LGBTQ arts festivals result in similar representational perspectives amongst this age group. So, similarly to media representation, LGBTQ arts festivals have increased and evolved over the last number of decades. This has been attributed to numerous factors, including progression with LGBTQ rights, assimilation into mainstream culture, and identity categories being constantly revised and contested. Because of this evolution, different styles regarding programming and representation have emerged within these festivals. So there are traditional styles which feature familiar, positive representations of the community. They do not include anything radical or transgressive. They lack intercultural representation and appeal to a mainstream audience. Non-traditional styles or queer styles representations aim to be countercultural that deviate from the norm. They offer opportunities for discussion regarding identity, and they can appeal to other minorities by facilitating intercultural dialogues. Some festivals indeed try to adopt both styles in order to appeal to a wide audience. So my research will explore which programming and representational style resonates with an emerging adult audience. So, qualitative interviews will be used to explore this somewhat complicated issue. However, another method was also deemed necessary for this project. Online surveys were deemed necessary in order to ask people demographic and somewhat sensitive questions, including sexuality and gender identity. This method was necessary to access people who may not want to reveal this information in person. The survey will be followed up by a semi-structured qualitative interview. This seemed to be a popular research method with other articles exploring Irish LGBTQ youth. Questions during the interview will be opinion-based and not personal. An example will be, do you think the names of the festivals directly illustrate their representational agenda? The sample size for this research will be 6 to 8 interviewees. Other research methods were considered but raised considerable ethical issues. So my ethical issues were significant during this research. This was predominantly due to figuring out the most appropriate way to ask someone to define their sexuality and gender identity. It required a lot of discussion with my supervisor with regard to why this question was important and what would be the best way to obtain the data. The question was deemed important in order to see if the cohort were defining themselves in more complex ways. Indeed, it also was important to emphasize that the LGBTQ community should not be seen as one homogeneous group. Different subsections of the community may have representational issues specific to them. Other research methods were considered, including only online methods, focus groups, and only one-on-one interviews. Solely online methods were deemed limiting in terms of exploring this complex issue, and both focus groups and one-on-one interviews raised issues as revealing identity terms in a social or one-on-one setting may have a negative impact on the participants. As such, all of these methods were deemed unsuitable and unethical. So, the data, interviewees will be selected from survey respondents. They will be grouped together in terms of identity, terminology, and location, and they will be selected at random from those groupings in order to represent geographic diversity and as many identity categories as possible. Thematic analysis will also be used to analyze the data and to explore similarities and differences, and also allow for unexpected and unanticipated responses. So the expected data will be that this cohort will believe that artists should be chosen not only to represent gender and sexual diversity as much as possible, but also other identity categories such as race, class, etc. So this decision should be in response to the limited representations of LGBTQ life in traditional media, and the representations and programs should act as a platform for discussion on different identity issues relevant to LGBTQ youth. So the expected data is partially based on an article on the Curiosity Festival conducted by Taylor in 2014. The above representational elements were central to the arts program, which targeted under 25-year-olds, giving them an opportunity to engage with arts and culture while also making sense of their own identity. So the critical evaluation, the project plan and progress. So although a project plan was drafted, it has not been a linear route. At this point, extensive literature has been reviewed, background research interviews with festival directors have been conducted, promotional material for the research project has been drafted. The project plan has changed repeatedly due to revised ethical approval submissions and potentially unnecessary research paths. As such, time scope available to recruit and interview participants, which will be conducted in the coming weeks, is now more limited than originally expected. So the strengths of my research is that it is socially relevant, and it is giving voice to a minority. It is historically relevant as these festivals have a history of evolving quite quickly in terms of audience. It Also uses multiple primary and secondary sources to explain complicated and sensitive issues. The limitations are that it is impossible to represent all potential identities within the LGBTQ community. As such, the findings cannot be generalized, and the data collection will be time consuming and more complicated to analyze. So, discussion: the practical implications for this research is that the data could contribute to each of these festivals' strategic plans to engage this younger demographic. The data also contributes to research regarding the evolving nature of LGBTQ arts festivals in terms of representational aims and audiences. It also contributes to research regarding the evolving nature of sexuality and gender identity. So, potential further research. One is the rise of LGBTQ content in mainstream arts festivals, which has resulted in conflicting opinions amongst festival programmers. It is positive for the community in terms of visibility, but limiting for the arts festivals in terms of content available to them. It was brought up by Roshan Garrity in an interview regarding gays, and explored further by Galt and Schunever. Another potential research topic is queer arts festivals, are they offensive to older LGBTQ generations? There has been a reluctance in festival directors to change their name to queer, although this term is more associated with younger audiences, as it may be offensive to their older attendees. There is also a reluctance to adopt a non-traditional style of programming, as it may move away from historical awareness of the LGBTQ movement. This was brought up by Brian Merriman in an interview regarding the Gay Theatre Festival, and explored further by Dan Enns in his investigation on identity politics at European LGBT film festivals. So that is the end of my presentation. This is my reference list, and any questions?